seamless continuation of the funds to be delivered to the families. The general rule is if you are drawing unemployment benefit, you will not benefit from the $600 a month. And it's very simple. As I said in recent times, this government must first deal with needs before it can deal with wants. And we deal with needs in order to ensure that next year, this time, that all who are standing now as far as possible will be standing as a result of our being able as a people to hold each other up, recognizing that the government is the one entity with the greatest girth now, especially with the implosion of the private economy and especially with the additional pressure on the charitable organizations. Having said that, I want to salute the Sandy Lane Trust for the significant sum of money that they have put in vouchers in every part of this country, without reference to any kind of other considerations. And I do believe that those families would want me to say thank you to them on their behalf, because those vouchers have made a significant difference in the ability of families to keep their heads above water. This is not different from what is happening in the United Kingdom or Canada or the United States of America, where other established charities have had to step into the void in order to help close the gap. The notion that there are tens of millions of people unemployed in the US really has been a leveler. And when people say that COVID is a leveler at all levels. It levels countries, it levels human beings, it levels everybody. Because none of us is immune from the reach of COVID, either from the public health reach or indeed from what has now become the economic reach, which, if we didn't know through literature what the Great Depression was like, we know it firsthand from our experience today. And I keep making the point that the resilience of our people is what is going to get us through. And why? Because I know that it was the resilience of our grandparents and great-grandparents that got them through. And they started that battle from a much lower point than the one from which we started today. We will continue to make the case for the fiscal policy room and the trade policy room and the general policy room for us to do the things that are necessary. And I want Barbadians to remember that when you hear us talk about trade policy, it's not because we're trying to talk above anybody's head or to be fancy about it, but we talk about it because at the end of the day, whether you can grow vegetables and not have the prices undermined by imports comes down to trade policy. At the end of the day, if you're growing carrots and string beans and cabbage, you want to know that you can secure a market for it and not have the supermarkets or other entities be able to import and sell at next kin to nothing goods that they're importing because they're coming from a country that is subsidizing their own agricultural production in a way that we have not been able to do as a small island state. And these things matter. And when people ask about the size of the cabinet, that is why the Honourable Member for St. James South has responsibility for these issues, because it will determine whether people in St. George or St. Philip or St. Lucie or St. Michael, with the Lear's Land Lease program coming, will be able to produce vegetables on a profitable basis without it being undermined by produce that comes from outside to undermine the prices. I say that while talking about the Adopt a Family program deliberately, because as we help families with this program, I want families to also help themselves. And I want Barbadians to return to that, because that was part of the resilience that allowed our grandparents and great-grandparents to get where they got. The notion of children taking out stock is more than just having lamb to eat when the day comes. It is about the discipline of knowing what it is to take care of a living organism, a living animal, and having to be responsible regardless of whatever else you have to do, homework, eating, going to school, going to play, whatever else persons have to do. Those children then have an obligation still to go and take out the stock and bring back in. In some instances, it's cows. In some instances, it is sheep. I'm trying to get, especially across the urban corridor, more and more Barbadian families owning sheep, raising sheep. Why? Because black belly sheep at the end of the day has a better health profile for us, as you know, Madam Chair, as a practitioner of medicine, than even New Zealand lamb, because there's less fat content. And to that extent, when the Minister of Agriculture speaks about us wanting to have 1 million black belly sheep being reared in this country, it is because we believe that that then can become something that the Minister of Manufacturing can be proud of with respect to agro-processing and perhaps labeling it. I throw out the name Triple B, only because Elombe, it was in my head for years talking about Triple B, Bajan black belly. You understand? And whatever it is, we can come up with that name or a different name, but we need a name to brand it so that people know that this special meat from Barbados, Bajan black belly sheep, is a delicacy. And while others may try to produce it, just as flying fish is our own, and there's a project that I'm now working with the Minister of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy and the private fishermen on to see how best we can deal with the reality that sargassum weed has literally caused problems for our fishermen to be able to access flying fish, because instead of the flying fish spawning by the side of the boats, the sargassum weed is carrying the flying fish down deep into the ocean, and the currents are then moving the fish, so that there are issues as to why we haven't seen the level of catch that we're going on. Believe you me, I'm not trying to digress too much, but believe you me, I need our families to take responsibility in the way that they can. Those families that want to have access to lambs, I am going to ask the same Adopt a Family unit to be able to make sure that we can give people access to lambs so that they can do it and give them that start off. And obviously it won't be 100 lambs. You may get 2 or 3 lambs to start, but it is a start for you to go. And we will also work with those who want to get into backyard farming. I am adamant that we need a new unit in government that focuses on transforming behavior. Government Information Service is about communication. But I need a Department of Public Affairs that is going to help us transform behavior. How do you plant string beans? How do you plant herbs as opposed to carrots, as opposed to sweet potatoes? Do I need to have an open field to plant sweet potatoes, or can I plant them in something that literally in my backyard in terms of canvas bags and that kind of thing? At the end of the day, you cut the canvas at the bottom and pull out the sweet potatoes. There are a whole host of master classes that we can do for our people, for these same families, the Adopt a Family program, so that as they come through this, they come through with greater skills than they went into it, while the government at the same time is supporting them and helping them move from day to day to eat. We will continue the philanthropic drive. We are conscious that not everyone is in a position to do it, but those of us who earn a little more than the rest, I ask us to remember, especially as we move into the end of the year, now is the time to give. The spirit of Christmas is what? Spirit of giving. And that really and truly, I want to appeal to Barbadians to remember that this program is here. It is being managed by public officials, so you need not worry. The accountability is there. It will come to Parliament. But in the meantime, we believe that government has the primary responsibility to put another $10 million in place to carry us to the end of March. The second part of the program, Madam Chair, is one that I am adamant that we must put on the agenda and achieve over the course of the next 7 years. I keep going back to the address that I made on the 2nd of January 2020, because it was not a light address. I spent the Christmas season reflecting on what was the message that I wanted to send Barbadians in the year 2020. I did not know that we would be reminded of its critical importance as a result of the pandemic. And it is even more necessary for us to achieve it, for us to become world class, for us to be that place. As we discussed yesterday evening as we finished with the movement of Nelson, where our people can be counted as among the most educated and culturally sensitive people in the entire world of any nation. Our people can become world class in every respect. If we want to have these lofty aspirations, then we've got to fix some things home at us first. And one of the few things that need to be fixed is the notion that we are going to let the fourth decade of the 21st century come with people in Barbados with pit toilets. This Barbados Labour Party government has not come just to talk across the world or to do the other things. Those are done in order to give us the policy space as I just described just now. But I am forever rooted that our primary responsibility is to uplift Barbadians regardless of their circumstances from the level that they're at to the next level. And the most difficult level for us to reason with in our heads, to understand how does a country reach 54 years and still have 4,000 odd pit toilets on its landscape. I say to you that the time has come for us to treat this as a special project. We were hoping as a government to get the funding in a special loan. It has not yet come through, but I'm not going to let this government wait any longer before we start the battle to eliminate pit toilets from the landscape of Barbados. We also recognize that it is critical that work be created for small contractors and tradesmen in this country, and who, at the end of the day, also have families that they must feed. And if we can therefore help them while helping us to obliterate from our landscape that presence of pit toilets, then we would have achieved both objectives with this simple allocation. As a result, I think we are all agreed that the majority of pit toilets are in fact in the urban corridor because of settlements that have come in, but we have learned that there are a number of them in the rural areas as well. And in many instances, what has been disturbing to me is that the progress made in the past has literally, in some instances, been reversed in the last decade. And there were a lot of people who, for whatever reason, because they were not working in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, and you become big men and women and you can't live in the same house without quarreling and fighting, and family look at you and tell you, look, you go and build something outside there because you can't live in this house with me. I love you, but you can't live out here with me. And they then send them outside to build something. Or, in some instances, the separation was not as pleasant as that, in which case they go and try to find somewhere, no job, they get an odd job, they go and get some wood, they get something, and they build a little shanty, for want of a better phrase. And let us not deny it. We know it happens in every constituency across this country. But I've seen far more of them this time round in government than I've ever seen when the last time we were there, because the last time we were there, most of the pit toilets related to houses that had them for decades. What we're now seeing is pit toilets that have come about in the last decade or so. And that is what is disturbing. And that is what has caused me to know that this government cannot ignore it, because if we ignore it, what we're going to see is a continued increase rather than a reduction in the numbers. So we are committed every year, and I'm committed now. There are a few things that we have done as a government to commit. The trust loan is one of them. This is another one of them. We are doing this in the midst of an IMF program, but we're doing this because at the end of the day, the quality of life of ordinary Barbadians matter. And if we start to understand why is there the social decay that is taking place in this country, we will start to recognize that all of these things add up towards it. Is this going to, in and of itself, solve the problems and stem the social decay? Not alone. But it is one of the critical things that must be done to bring back dignity. A day like today, and yesterday, the rain falling all day, all night, all day, all night. And you have older people who have helped build this country, and this is what they're going to have to rely on to go outside, and next thing you know, they fall down and break a hip. And next thing you know, it's another problem that they're facing, and in some instances, their life is at risk. Let's look at it from the younger people perspective. You got young kids, they're frightened necessarily now in today's age. There is more shame because social media has created this alter ego that I find difficult to understand sometimes. But everything is about show. And these kids now may not want to bring home people by them because they know that if they want to go to the bathroom, they only got to put toilet in at them. There's all kinds of things going on. And I am not giving no Bajan no more extra luggage to carry on the shoulder or no quarries to carry on the shoulder. So let's deal with it, get it out the way. It's going to take 5, 6, 7 years, depending on the fiscal space that we have, in order to put this behind us. But it must now be seen as a priority for the Ministry of Finance to provide these funds, because in the same way that we started to set about obliterating the tenantry roads that were mud and rock and stone, as the last Barbados Labour Party government did, where we put in a whole host of paved roads across this country, across rural and urban Barbados, in a way that has allowed people to be able to get to their houses, to have ambulance and other emergency vehicles, get closer to them, for them not to walk with plastic bags and 2 and 3 pairs of shoes because of these circumstances. And while that is not fully finished, we have come a long way from when I came into public life in 1989 in this country, from where we were in 1989. I hope that in 7 years from now, we can say that the only reason anybody has a pit toilet is because they went and dig one the week before. And that in truth and in fact, we become a country that literally works with persons to ensure that this is not part and parcel of the legacy that an independent Barbados gives them to move into the next generation. So with those words, I'd like to ask for $5 million for the Rural Development Program, Commission, and $7.5 million for the Urban Development Commission. I anticipate before the beginning of the next fiscal year that we will have the National Development Commission, and integrating the two of these with a rural and an urban component. We are doing it because it makes no sense to us to have 2 separate HR departments, 2 separate finance departments, 2 separate IT departments, when in truth and in fact we can consolidate the 2 institutions as one, but still leave them with their mandates in terms of rural Barbados and urban Barbados, so that there is not that lack of appreciation for the difference between the 2 entities. Parish like, and a constituency like St. George North and St. James South and St. James Central, you all defy. And even St. Michael Northeast, my own constituency, has elements of both urban and rural in it, and therefore we continue to be guided by the boundaries in the legislation. But equally, we recognize that the urban stretch is moving above that highway mark more and more, and therefore we may have to do some slight tweaking to how we treat to it, because Charro Bridge is as urban as they get now in Glebe is as urban as they get in St. George now, in terms of the services that it provides, the town center that it really is for Central Barbados. So we're mindful of those things, but a National Development Commission that is intended to treat to the development issues of households and communities in a focused way that is not yet captured in any other state-owned enterprise that we have. Madam Chair, with those few words, I beg to move that Head 13 stand part, and that it finds favor with the members of this honorable committee, as I believe that these sums of money will make a significant difference to tens of thousands of households in the remaining part of this fiscal year, from the point of view of the Adopt a Family program, but also from the point of view of the hundreds of people that will benefit, we hope, ultimately from the pit toilet, the eradication of pit toilets in our country. I'm obliged to you, ma'am.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wish to add my gratitude to the supplementaries here today, and in particular, I want to focus on the Adopt a Families project, where over 4,000, almost 4,000 persons have been the recipients of the debit cards, and that project had run for 3 months, and then when we recognized that COVID is still with us, it had been extended to 6 months, and it means that the injection of the $9 million, almost $10 million into this project will help to go a long way in helping to ease the suffering of those many thousands of recipients and others who would not have fitted the profile at that time, when we acknowledge how so many other persons, especially in the tourism sector and others, are now on the breadline, having received their benefits long time ago, and they have already been dried up. And so I believe that the 10.364 million that was expended between May and the late September, having seen that it is gone, because many of the persons I meet every day, sometimes I get 300 WhatsApp messages and calls, and the hotlines are still going at the ministry and at the household mitigation unit, because persons have used up their funds. And so I am a really strong support, but I would not want to overlook the outstanding contributions of those various agencies, Barbadians in the diaspora, locals, and the various charities, Corporate Barbados, and individuals who have sought to inject funding into these projects to make a difference in the lives of Barbadians. I also want to indicate, ma'am, that many thousands of people having benefited have not been persons who have been identified by us in any way that is political, but because of the interviews and the assessments that were done, not only through the mitigation unit, but indeed our social workers and others on the ground, as well as individuals who called in to indicate, my neighbor is falling through the cracks, what help can I get? And those assessments were made with the social workers going into the homes. We were able to get a better idea as to what is actually happening now. And there's nothing worse in the world, ma'am, to reach this stage in our development when Christmas is now so bleak for so many thousands of families in Barbados and indeed in the world. And so any injection of funds to have this project extended is welcomed, because we know that the people feel it. All of us here as parliamentarians and those others out there who are interested see every day and learn every day of the suffering that is taking place. Nothing that we have ever experienced our foreparents did during the war and in other times. But this is the first time in my life, and I'm not 10 years old, or 50 years, or 60. I have surpassed that now, thank God. But I'm saying it's the first time in my life, and being an individual always on the ground and in everybody's face, it's the first time I've ever experienced this kind of suffering beyond natural sicknesses. And so there is a need for this injection to be put in place. And I want to thank the Honourable Prime Minister and her team for giving us the privilege to be able to see an extension of the project to lend that element of hope to all Barbadians who are now suffering at this time, to give them an element of hope that they will be able to go forward. I know that there are many faith-based groups, community groups, Corporate Barbados, who came on board when the COVID pandemic struck, and they too injected many gifts, the hand sanitizers, the masks, foodstuffs, other items that would have been able to keep Barbados alive. And therefore, I think it is incumbent upon me, having had all of those donations, all of those benefactors coming in to help those beneficiaries, I think it is only fitting that I laud the excellent performance of the Ministry of Health and the frontliners in helping us to be able to stabilize in our country the spread of COVID in the way that we are seeing it in the international world, where countries have so many billions of dollars and every day their numbers are climbing. So I want to congratulate the Honourable Minister and other ministers in the various stakeholder ministries that have worked assiduously over the time of COVID to be able to stabilize our country. I also want ma'am to indicate that volunteers did an excellent job. We know that the National Assistance Board had its own challenges, but thousands of volunteers called in. Many persons came to assist because our most vulnerable also include our senior citizens who are suffering in some way or another. And I want to congratulate those volunteers and those community-based organizations that made those efforts to be able to help us. I also want, Madam Chair, to indicate that yes, people are still falling through the cracks. All of us see it. The churches, the faith-based groups, other institutions are seeing it, and families are feeling it more than ever. And so challenges in the year 2020, where there's stark poverty in some households. It would have been bad before, but COVID has made it worse. People can't get food in the way that they would like. Amenities, the light, the water, well, the telephone, that is important too, but they have now lost a lot of the resources. Yes, there was a commitment from the entities responsible that they will give a stay of allowing the lights to be kept on, that the water will be reconnected and so on and so forth, but there are still challenges. Some people's own have been taken off, and therefore we have to empathize with them, because this new generation has grown so accustomed to all of those amenities, and rightly so, because the only way our children can use the tablets in the schools and in other institutions, or the only way that we can work from home, especially if we are so impoverished, is if we have those amenities still up and running. And so housing has become another big problem. There are so many landlords, and I'm not going to say they're unscrupulous at all. Some of them are, but there are many landlords who have sent out eviction notices or have evicted persons. And it is sad, and unfortunately so, but I acknowledge that there are some landlords who rely on the funds in order to pay their own mortgages, and so they might have done what they had to do. But my biggest concern is that families have been turning away their own. And I do not in any way support individuals having to display elements of high disrespect for older persons in our society. And so some children have been disrespectful to their parents, so they've turned them away. And when they turn them away, where are they going to go? The Ministry of People Empowerment and the Ministry of Housing and Land, Rural and Urban, have not got any houses. The last administration gave away the houses, and we understand. And therefore, there are limited spaces to provide, and that's the reason why the Honourable Minister of Health and his team are now saddled with an additional 25 senior citizens who are not going back home because family don't want them back, or the conditions under which they live is so perilous. And so there are myriad challenges that we are facing in this society. But I want to thank those landlords and landladies and other persons who have given shelter to individuals and families, because at the end of the day, we need to be humanitarian in whatever we do. We can't say we love God whom we cannot see, but here's our brothers and sisters whom we can see. And therefore, I laud those efforts of those individuals, and I plead with those families that have been taken in or given a chance with the reprieve from having to pay the rent, to show utmost respect for those families and individuals who have given them an extra lien on life, at least on life. And it is hurtful when we look at human dignity and see the level that many persons have dropped. And it's not only working class people. There are some middle class people who are just not making it. The banks and the credit unions are zeroing in on them, and many of them are nervous. And if they choose to call me whom they do not know, to lay it out, and I hear the crying and the pleading, it says we really need to get on board and make sure at least that there is food and that measures are put in place to ease those persons who are suffering in those various ways. There's nothing more discomforting than to work hard for years, and then you have only 2 more years to pay your mortgage, and because you have been unemployed due to COVID, due to the scaling down of employment, that you now are on the brink of losing the only thing that you might have worked so hard and made so many sacrifices to hold on to, the house that you and your family are living in. And I'm pleading with the agencies to give those persons who are in that, we call it as a major word, pocketary, in that particular situation, an extra period of time to help them to gather, to help them to be able to rely on other family members, at least to put together an amount of the funds to be able to keep the shelter over their head. Barbados is small, we don't have space to facilitate all these people who have been displaced, unfortunately, but I rely on the judgment of those business entities to help Barbadians to continue to have a new lease on life. I also want, before I close, Madam Chair, to indicate that the Welfare Department had been given an additional 10 million for this financial year, and it is probably it's on the brink of exhaustion, because the Welfare Department has been working over the past months to be able to meet those needs of Barbadians who are falling through the cracks, as well as to cater to those persons who received the services before. And it is extremely challenging for them to be able to achieve those goals of serving Barbadians as a whole. And so these fundings will help. And I want to laud those efforts of Barbadians who are caught right in the midst of the COVID, and the impact that it's having on them have determined we are resilient people. And we're going to put up our little wayside kiosks, or we're going to make masks, or we're going to make some bread, or we're going to sell whatever to be able to keep our heads above water. We have always had resilient people in Barbados. When our parents had to work in the agricultural belt, they made sure that they did a little sowing. They made sure that whatever produce they had in the little plot that they rented from the plantations, that they took it to Bridgetown or wherever, Spikestown, wherever, on a Saturday morning to make sales to be able to bring in. But you know what is best about Barbadians? The whole approach of the barter system. I go pumpkins, you go potatoes, we give, we share. And what saved our generation was the shopkeepers who would have allowed us to be able to what we call trust and pay back the money the next week or whenever funds were made available. We don't have those anymore as far as I can recall, and therefore we need to get back to the life that helps us. I want to commend the Honourable Prime Minister because of the vision that she has in relation to families who are so disadvantaged, families who are so impoverished that they are now building the shanties onto their families' houses and so. But I encourage families again, pool the resources. You can't be there with your partner living on the same land, using up the water or whatever is in that household that is in front of yours or behind yours, and then not putting in something to help pay the light bill, or not speaking to your mother, or not bringing in your bag and somebody else who has the sugar, and pool. That is what we all knew as proud Barbadians. And therefore I encourage them to continue to do so, because we have identified families in our poverty project, sometimes 15 and 20 people. And it's not only urban Barbados, rural Barbados has got some of them as well, and they're all falling through the cracks. So I encourage the pooling of the resources and helping to heal broken families. And as I conclude, ma'am, I want to say that I am from the generation where the 4-H movement encouraged every community to grow something, to make something, to do something meaningful that will help to build the government and the families. And it is unfortunate we have so many secondary schools that have got space. St. George Secondary is doing an excellent job. Grantley Adams is doing an excellent job with the animal husbandry and all that. I know that Lester Vaughan is now beginning to get back on his feet, but there's so many others, and we need to incorporate agriculture into whatever we are doing, because that is all that will help to sustain us. We can feed ourselves, we can reduce that import bill on food to make the difference. And so Barbadians have been strong, they have been resilient, they used to raise their own animals. I did. I know what it is like to milk the cow when they kick down the whole bucket of milk. I know what it's like to carry out the sheep and graze it along the road, and now we have to go and plant back hedgerow and all that. to be able to build back Barbados and save topsoil from running away. I know what it is like to be putting my money into the Bright Star Lodge, that I can get new shoes to start up the new school year, otherwise crap will smoke my pipe. And so we were resilient, we were industrious, we were hardworking, proud Barbadians. And I encourage others to join in that and make the difference. The pride and industry, the dignity towards work, thrift, feeding ourselves and in our villages, that still is extremely important. And I want to indicate, ma'am, again, how I have given my support not only to this aspect of the supplementary, but indeed for the one with the pit toilets that will, and the eradication and all others that will come into this particular vote to the tune of 30, I think it is 32 million. I would have had it jotted down, but you know how it is, ma'am, when you're getting young, sometimes you forget. But the amount that the Honourable Prime Minister indicated just now to help to advance Barbados and to give our people a more comforting set of experiences as we go through the COVID and the unemployment that is spiraling. We need to come together as a people and give, share, respect each other to make sure that everybody is happy despite what level they're at. They're safe, they have shelter, they have food, and they have love within the households and in the communities that will spiral across this entire country. I wish to thank you, ma'am, for the privilege.
Thank you. Honourable Member for the City.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again.
Seconder. Question is that I do not report to His Honour the Speaker progress and ask for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. I think the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported progress and asked for leave to sit again. Honourable for City of Bridgetown.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension for lunch until 2:05 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chairman will be suspended for lunch until 2:05 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 5 minutes after 2.